These are the 10 worst cars ever made. These cars are so bad they should never have existed in the first place. The process of coming out with a car idea, designing it, building it, and finally selling it to the final customer can be long and laborious. However, when done right, it can result in iconic vehicles like the Porsche 911, Ford F-150 and Mustang, or the Mazda Miata, just to name a few. Unfortunately, for every great vehicle ever built, there are countless others that are just terrible. Even in modern times, when most manufacturers seem to have perfected the art of automaking, there are still awful cars rolling out of production facilities today. Ugly, unreliable, and terrible to drive. These are 10 of the worst cars ever made. Number 10. The Pontiac Aztek. The Aztek is an SUV that Pontiac introduced in the early 2000s to take advantage of the growing SUV demand. However, while the Aztek was meant to be a savior for the failing Pontiac division, it ended up being the final nail in its coffin. When GM launched the Aztek, the first thing that everyone noticed was its horrid design. The Aztek is definitely one of the ugliest cars ever built. Those weird nostrils, the multiple eyes, and unusual rear end make it look deformed and scary. Number 9. The AMC Gremlin. AMC designer Richard Teague will always be remembered for designing some of the coolest cars of the 60s and 70s. The AMC Gremlin is not one of them. Everything about this little car was terrible. For starters, the design looked cheap and unfinished. It looked like Teague basically chopped off the rear of the AMC Hornet with an axe and left it at that. Then there's the build quality. The cheap interior with plastic made the Gremlin a terrible car to be in. A heavy 6-cylinder engine and poor handling also made the Gremlin a pain to drive. Number 8. The Ford Pinto. Ford introduced the Pinto in the early 70s to take advantage of the growing demand for subcompact, fuel-efficient cars. The Pinto was not a particularly bad car, but what earns it a spot on every worst cars list is its volatile nature. The Pinto had a habit of bursting into flames if it got rear-ended, leading to multiple injuries and even deaths. Apparently, Ford had learned of the Pinto's explosion issues during the crash test, but chose to produce it anyway. This turned out to be a huge mistake, as Ford later lost millions in recalls and lawsuits. Number 7. Hummer H2. Most gearheads consider the Hummer H2 to be the symbol of everything wrong with the American auto industry, and it's easy to see why. The H2 was designed to be the road-legal version of tough American military vehicles, but it ended up being a humongous hunk of metal with an unsightly design and an uncomfortable ride quality. The worst thing about the H2, though, was its fuel economy. GM was lucky that it didn't have to provide official MPG figures for the H2, but several reputable automotive magazines ran tests and returned a meager 10 miles per gallon. A road trip in the H2 was enough to leave the average American bankrupt. Suzuki X90. In the 90s, someone at Suzuki thought it was a great idea to make a practical sports car. The result was the X90, a 2-seat SUV. The idea sounded great on paper, but when the X90 came out, everyone realized how bad it was. The X90 was neither practical to live with nor sporty to drive. It was also quite ugly, especially because it was hard to tell which side was the front. Then there's the engine, powered by a 1.6-liter 4-cylinder with just 94 horsepower on tap. The X90 took an eternity to accelerate to 60. If you're enjoying the video so far, let us know if we're hitting the mark, or if you have thoughts. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to get more videos like this one. Number 5. Reliant Robin. The Reliant Robin is a car that always leaves people wondering, what was the manufacturer thinking? Voted the worst British car of all time, the Robin was another 3-wheeled car experiment that failed miserably. The Robin had a few things going for it. It was super light thanks to fiberglass construction, had a fuel economy of 70 miles per gallon, and could achieve an 85 mile per hour top speed. However, anyone who managed to achieve such speeds would have to drive in a straight line, as any turns would almost certainly leave them overturned. Their steering wheel would also pop off randomly while in motion. Number 4. Chrysler PT Cruiser Convertible. When Chrysler introduced the PT Cruiser for the first time, many gearheads praised it for its retro-inspired looks. However, it didn't take long for gearheads to notice how ugly it was. The convertible version was even worse. Removing the PT Cruiser's roof meant that its structural rigidity was almost non-existent. So, to fix the issue, Chrysler engineers added a ghastly roll hoop right between the front and rear seats. The convertible was supposed to save the PT Cruiser, but it ended up being way worse in every way. The Reva G Whiz. If you're a fan of the British TV show Top Gear, you've probably heard Jimmy Clarkson tearing into the G-Wiz. Clarkson's main complaints about the G-Wiz revolved around its design, performance, lack of space, and horrible safety ratings. All of these were accurate. G-Wiz was built in India in 2001 and was supposed to be an affordable electric car that even teens could drive. The idea was good, the execution, not so much. For one, the G-Wiz could hardly accommodate one person, let alone the 4 people Reva claimed it could accommodate. Build quality was poor, and no 2 cars left the factory looking exactly the same. The top speed was 50 miles per hour, but going over 30 miles per hour could easily land the driver in a coffin. Austin Allegro. The Allegro was yet another legendary disaster come out of Britain. Introduced in 1973, the Allegro was supposed to replace the popular but ancient Austin 1100. However, a rushed production made it one of Austin's worst mistakes. First of all, the Allegro's design was ugly and boring compared to the hot hatches it was trying to compete with. Reliability was also a major problem, as the front axle would often collapse while in motion. Austin also made the mistake of equipping the Allegro with the ugly Quartic steering wheel. Number 1. The Hugo GV. Hugo was built in communist-led Yugoslavia, which was already a good sign that it was going to be a disaster. The Hugo was designed to be affordable for everyone, which means that the only thing designers focused on was ensuring that it could get from point A to point B. Everything else was just an afterthought. The exterior design was an eyesore, but the interior was even worse, with plastic components sticking out everywhere. A 1.1-liter engine generating 55 horsepower could barely move the Hugo. However, despite all its flaws, the Hugo still found its way to America. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Daily Driver's channel. Press the bell icon for incoming updates. See you in the next video.